Hal had lived for 300 cycles. In all that time, he had never felt afraid. Fear was something other species talked about, something weak and primitive. They did not feel such things. They observed. They recorded. They moved through the galaxy like ghosts, watching civilizations rise and fall without ever getting involved. The High Council had given Hal a new assignment. He was to board a human vessel and observe their military operations. Humans were a young species. They had only been traveling between stars for 200 years. They had been doing it for 10,000. To Hal, humans were like children playing with dangerous toys. The ship was called the Endurance. It was not a large vessel by galactic standards. They had ships that could carry entire cities. The Endurance could barely hold 500 crew members, but when Hal stepped aboard, he noticed something strange. The humans moved with purpose. They looked at each other with trust. There was an energy on this ship that he had not seen before. Captain Daniel Brooks met him at the docking port. The human was not impressive to look at. He was of average height with brown hair that was turning gray. His eyes were the color of deep ocean water. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations except for a small pin on his chest. "Welcome aboard the Endurance," Brooks said. He extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "We're honored to have an observer with us." Hal looked at the hand for a moment before taking it. Human skin was warm, much warmer than skin. The captain's grip was firm but not aggressive. "I am here to observe and report to the collective," Hal said. "I will not interfere with your operations." Brooks smiled. It was a strange expression. They did not smile. They had no need for such displays of emotion. "You're welcome to go anywhere on the ship," the captain said. "Ask anyone anything. We have nothing to hide." This surprised Hal. Most species were protective of their military secrets. They did not invite observers to watch their every move. Either humans were very confident or very foolish. Perhaps both. The captain led him through the corridors of the ship. Crew members passed them constantly, nodding to their captain with respect. Some of them looked at Hal with curiosity but not fear. This was also unusual. They were known across the galaxy. Most species were uncomfortable in their presence. "I should warn you," Brooks said as they walked. "This is not going to be a simple patrol mission. We're heading to the Reach." Hal stopped walking. His twin hearts, which usually beat in perfect rhythm, stumbled for a moment. "The Reach," he repeated. "That is hollowed territory." "Yes." The hollowed harvest organic beings for their neural patterns. They are one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Even they avoid them. Brooks nodded slowly. "I know, but there's a colony in the Reach station. 8,000 civilians. The hollowed have surrounded them. They're going to be harvested within the week if no one helps." "Then they will be harvested," Hal said. "No force in the galaxy can break through a hollowed blockade. The mathematics are clear. Any rescue attempt would be suicide." The captain turned to face him. There was no anger in his eyes, no frustration. Just a calm certainty that made Hal uncomfortable. 8,000 people, Brooks said quietly. 400 of them are children. They're counting on someone to come for them. Other species have refused to help. Every single one. The collective did not even respond to the request. This was true. Hal had seen the message from Station in the Council records. It had been filed away without discussion. 8,000 lives were simply not worth the risk. "And yet you are going," Hal said. "We are. Even though you will almost certainly die." Brooks smiled again, but this time it was different. There was sadness in it and something else. Something that looked like pride. "Observer, let me tell you something about humans. We don't do math when lives are on the line. We don't calculate acceptable losses. Every single person on that station matters to us. Not because they're useful or important, but because they're ours. And we don't abandon our own." Hal did not know how to respond. In 300 cycles, he had never heard any species talk this way. They certainly did not. Individuals were replaceable. The collective was eternal. That was the way of things. "You think we are foolish," Brooks said. It was not a question. "I think you are emotional," Hal replied. "Emotion leads to poor decisions. This has been proven throughout galactic history." "Maybe, but emotion also leads to incredible things. It leads to sacrifice, to heroism, to people doing things that should be impossible because they care too much to give up." The captain started walking again. Hal followed, his mind processing what he had heard. "I will not try to stop you," he said finally. "My role is to observe, not to interfere, but I must formally note my objection to this mission in my report." "Noted," Brooks said. "Now let me introduce you to the crew. If we're going to die together, you should at least know their names." Over the next several hours, Hal met the senior officers of the Endurance. Lieutenant Maria Santos was the tactical officer. She was small for a human female, but she moved like a predator. Her eyes were always watching, always calculating. Chief Engineer Cole was a large man with hands covered in scars and grease stains. He spoke about the ship's engines with a love that Hal found strange. It was just a machine, but Cole talked about it like it was alive. Dr. Lisa Park ran the medical bay. She was preparing for mass casualties, setting up beds and equipment for hundreds of wounded. When Hal asked why she bothered when rescue was impossible, she just shrugged. "Because I believe we're coming back," she said, "all of us, and I'll be ready when we do." That night Hal stood alone in the observation deck, watching the stars stream past as the Endurance traveled through hyperspace. In 2 days, they would reach the Reach. In 2 days, they would face the Hollowed. He thought about what the captain had said, about not abandoning their own, about caring too much to give up. They had survived for 10,000 cycles by being careful, by avoiding risk, by never getting attached to anything or anyone. It had made them strong. It had made them eternal. But standing in the darkness, watching humanity rush toward almost certain death, Hal wondered if they had lost something along the way. Something important. Something that these strange, short-lived creatures still possessed. He did not know what it was, but he was beginning to suspect that he was about to find out. The next morning, Hal began his observations in earnest. He walked through every section of the ship, watching the humans work and live and prepare for the battle ahead. What he saw confused him more with each passing hour. In the training room, Lieutenant Santos was teaching combat techniques to a group of young crew members. They were barely adults by human standards, fresh from their training academies. Santos moved among them, correcting their stances, showing them how to block and strike. Hal stood in the doorway and watched. One young man, an ensign named Porter, kept making the same mistake. His footwork was wrong. Again and again, Santos showed him the correct way. Again and again, he failed. Any instructor would have given up on him. Resources were precious. Time spent on those who could not learn was time wasted. But Santos did not give up. She stayed with Porter for an extra hour after the others had left, patiently guiding his movements until he finally got it right. "Why do you spend so much effort on one person?" Hal asked when the session ended. Santos wiped sweat from her face and looked at him. "Because he matters. He is one crew member among hundreds. His individual skill will not change the outcome of the mission." "You're wrong," she said simply. "Every person on this ship could be the one who makes the difference, might be the one who saves the captain's life, or mine, or yours. I can't know that ahead of time, so I treat everyone like they're essential, because they are." She picked up her equipment and headed for the door. Before she left, she turned back. "You think of people as numbers, don't you? Parts of a machine that can be replaced. We're not like that. Every life is unique. Every death leaves a hole that can never be filled. That's why we fight so hard. That's why we don't leave anyone behind." Hal thought about this as he made his way to the engineering section. The did think of individuals as replaceable. It was efficient. It was logical. But standing in the corridor of this human ship, surrounded by people who would die for each other without hesitation, he began to wonder if efficiency was everything. Chief Engineer Cole was buried inside a maintenance panel when Hal found him. Only his legs were visible, sticking out into the corridor. Strange sounds came from inside the panel, a combination of tools and human words that did not translate well. "Mr. Cole," Hal said. "Just a second," came the muffled reply. More sounds. Then Cole slid out, his face covered in grease and his hands full of damaged components. "Observer, what can I do for you?" "I am curious about your work schedule. Ship records indicate you have been working for 16 hours without rest. Human bodies require sleep to function properly." Cole laughed. It was a warm sound, not mocking. "I'll sleep when we're through the reach. Right now, every system on this ship needs to be perfect. One failure at the wrong moment and we all die." "You cannot prevent all failures. That is statistically impossible." "Maybe," Cole held up one of the damaged components, "but I can try. See this? It's a backup power regulator. Most engineers would just replace it and move on, but I'm rebuilding it by hand, making it stronger than the factory version. Because when we're surrounded by hollowed ships and everything is falling apart, this little piece might be the thing that keeps us alive." He stood up and stretched his back. Hal heard joints popping, a sign of physical strain. "You want to know what humans are really about," Cole said. "It's not the big things. It's not the battles or the speeches. It's this. It's staying up all night to make sure a power regulator works perfectly. It's checking every bolt and wire because you know that your friends are depending on you. We're not heroes, observer. We're just people who care too much to do anything less than our best." Hal left engineering with more questions than answers. He went to the medical bay next, where Dr. Park was training her staff for the coming emergency. The medical bay had been transformed. Extra beds filled every available space. Equipment was stacked on every surface. Park moved through the chaos with calm efficiency, checking supplies and giving instructions. "You are preparing for many casualties," Hal observed. 300 wounded, Park said without looking up. "That's my estimate, maybe more. The crew only numbers 500. You expect more than half to be injured." "I expect everyone to come back hurt in some way. Burns from overloaded systems, broken bones from impacts, radiation exposure from weapons fire. This isn't going to be a clean fight, observer. It's going to be brutal. And yet you prepare as if everyone will survive." Now Park did look at him. Her eyes were tired but determined. "Because that's my job. The captain's job is to get us through the hollowed fleet. Santos's job is to fight them. Cole's job is to keep the ship running. My job is to put everyone back together when it's over. We each do our part and somehow it all works out." "That is a very optimistic view." Park smiled sadly. "It's the only view I can afford to have. If I started thinking about how many people I might lose, I couldn't do my job, so I focus on saving everyone. I prepare for the worst and hope for the best. It's the human way." That evening, Hal attended the crew meal in the main dining hall. It was a tradition on human ships, he had learned. Before a major battle, the entire crew ate together. The captain sat at a table with common crew members, sharing food and conversation like equals. Hal watched from a corner, fascinated by what he saw. There was fear in the room. He could see it in the way some hands shook, in the quiet voices, in the eyes that stared at nothing. These humans knew they might die tomorrow, but they did not hide from each other. They gathered together and faced their fear as one. Captain Brooks stood at the end of the meal. The room fell silent immediately. "Tomorrow we enter the Reach," he said. His voice was calm and clear. "Tomorrow we face the hollowed. I'm not going to tell you it will be easy because it won't. I'm not going to promise that everyone comes home because I can't, but I can promise you this." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his crew. "We will not abandon station. We will not turn back. We will not surrender. Those people are counting on us and we will not let them down. Because that's who we are. That's what humans do. We save people. Even when it seems impossible. Especially when it seems impossible. The room erupted in cheers. Humans stood and embraced each other. Some were crying. Others were laughing. The emotion in the room was overwhelming. Hal stood alone in his corner trying to understand what he was seeing. These people were about to fly into almost certain death. By every logical calculation, they should be terrified and demoralized. Instead, they were united and determined. For the first time in 300 cycles, Hal felt something stir in his twin hearts. He did not know what it was, but he suspected that these humans were about to teach him something they had forgotten long ago. The Endurance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Reach. Hal was on the bridge when it happened, standing near the back where he could observe everything. What he saw made both his hearts stop. The hollowed fleet filled the 300 ships hung in space, their dark angular forms blocking out the stars. They were arranged in a perfect sphere around station, leaving no gaps, no weaknesses. The station itself was tiny compared to the fleet surrounding it, 8,000 lives waiting to be harvested. "Contact confirmed," Lieutenant Santos said. Her voice was steady, but Hal could see tension in her shoulders. 312 hollowed vessels, mixed classes, weapons are charged. Captain Brooks stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He studied the tactical display for a long moment without speaking. Every crew member watched him, waiting for orders. "Captain," Hal said, stepping forward, "I must formally recommend withdrawal. The collective cannot sanction participation in this mission. The odds against success are astronomical." Brooks did not turn around. "Lieutenant, how many people on that station?" 8,237, Santos replied, "including 412 children." "Then we stay." Hal felt frustration, an emotion he had not experienced in decades. "This is not rational. You are one ship against 300. You will be destroyed in minutes." Now the captain did turn. His eyes met Hal's and there was no anger in them, only quiet determination. "Observer, I understand your concern, but there are children on that station, families, people who sent a message to the galaxy begging for help and everyone turned away, everyone except us." He turned back to the "We're not turning away." Brooks pressed a button on his command chair. "Open a channel, all frequencies, including hollowed communication bands." "Channel open, sir." The captain's voice carried across the darkness of space. "This is Captain Daniel Brooks of the human vessel Endurance. We are here for the civilians on station. You will allow us to evacuate them." There was no response. The Hollowed did not negotiate. They did not communicate in words. They simply took what they wanted. "They're not going to talk," Santos said quietly. "I know, but I wanted them to hear us. I wanted them to know that we came." Brooks looked at his crew. "Battle stations. All hands prepare for combat." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Officers moved to their stations. Systems powered up. The ship itself seemed to come alive, humming with energy and purpose. "Helm, plot a course through the fleet. Find me the weakest point in their formation." "Sir, there is no weak point. Their formation is perfect." "Then find me the least strong point. We're going through." The Hollowed began to move. Their ships shifted, tightening the formation around the station. They knew the Endurance was coming. They were preparing to destroy it. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, Santos reported. "Hold fire, we're not here to fight, we're here to rescue." "Sir, they're going to tear us apart." Brooks smiled grimly. "Then we'd better be fast. Cole, I need everything from the engines, more than everything. Push them past the limit." The engineer's voice came through the comm. "You'll get it, Captain. Just keep us pointed in the right direction." The Endurance surged forward. The first hollowed weapons fire came moments later, bright beams of energy that sliced through space toward them. Santos worked her controls frantically, directing the defensive systems. Shields holding, barely. More fire. The ship shook violently. Hal grabbed a railing to keep from falling. Around him, humans worked their stations with intense focus, calling out information and adjustments. Hull breach on Deck 7, sealing now. Power fluctuation in secondary systems, rerouting. Enemy vessels converging on our position. Brooks watched the tactical display, tracking their progress through the enemy fleet. They were moving faster than should have been possible, weaving between hollowed ships, taking hits but staying alive. There, he said suddenly, pointing at the display. That gap. Helm, adjust course 15 degrees starboard. That gap is barely wide enough for us, sir. Then we'd better not miss. The Endurance dove toward the gap in the hollowed formation. Enemy fire intensified, hammering the shields from all directions. The ship groaned under the assault. Warning alarms filled the air. Shields at 30%. Engine 2 is overheating. Medical teams to Deck 4, multiple casualties. Hal watched in amazement as the humans fought their dying ship. No one panicked. No one gave up. They worked together with a coordination that seemed almost impossible, each person doing their job while trusting everyone else to do theirs. And then, impossibly, they were through. The Endurance burst out of the hollowed formation and found clear space between the enemy fleet and station. "We're through," Santos said. Her voice was filled with disbelief. "I don't believe it, we're through." "Don't celebrate yet," Brooks said. "They'll regroup in minutes. Helm, get us to that station. Communications, open a channel to." A frightened voice answered the call. "This is Station. Are you really here to help us?" "We are. Start moving everyone to the docking ports. We're going to get you out of here." "But how the hollowed?" "Leave the hollowed to us. Just get your people ready. We don't have much time." The Endurance docked with Station. Crew members rushed to the airlocks, preparing to receive the refugees. Brooks left the bridge in Santos's hands and went personally to oversee the evacuation. Hal followed him. He watched as the first civilians came aboard, families clutching children, elderly people supported by the young, wounded carried on stretchers. They poured onto the ship in a flood of fear and hope. "Thank you," a woman said, tears streaming down her face. She held a small child in her arms. "Thank you for coming." Brooks took her hand. "We'll get you home, I promise." More people came, hundreds, thousands. The ship was designed for 500 crew. Soon it was holding 10 times that many. People filled every corridor, every room, every available space. Captain Cole's voice came over the comm. "We're way over capacity. The life support systems are straining." "Make it work." "I'm trying, but physics is physics." "Then bend physics. These people are counting on us." There was a pause. Then Cole laughed, a sound of pure determination. "Understood, Captain. I'll bend physics." Hal stood in a corridor packed with refugees and watched the humans work. They moved among the civilians with calm efficiency, providing water and blankets and comfort. They treated every person like they mattered. Because to these strange, impossible humans, every person did matter. "Observer," a small voice said. Hal looked down. A human child stood before him, maybe 5 years old. The child looked up at him with wide eyes full of curiosity rather than fear. "Are you going to save us too?" the child asked. Hal did not know how to answer. He was not part of this crew. He was an observer. His role was to watch, not to participate. But looking at that small face, those trusting eyes, he found himself saying something he had never expected. "Yes, we are going to save you." The child smiled and ran back to its mother. Hal watched them disappear into the crowd of refugees. He had said we, not they we. Something was changing inside him. He did not understand it yet, but he knew that by the end of this mission, he would be different. These humans were teaching him something he had never learned in 300 cycles of observation. They were teaching him what it meant to care. The evacuation took 17 minutes. 17 minutes of organized chaos as 8,000 people fled station and crowded onto a ship built for 500. By the end, the Endurance was packed so tightly that crew members had to climb over refugees to reach their stations. And then the Hollowed came. They had regrouped during the evacuation, forming a new sphere around the station with the Endurance trapped inside. This time there were no gaps. This time there was no escape route. Hal returned to the bridge and found Captain Brooks staring at the tactical display. The situation was worse than before. The Hollowed had learned from their first failure. They had adapted their formation to prevent another breakthrough. "Captain," Lieutenant Santos said quietly, "I'm not seeing a way out." "I know. Our shields are at 12%. Weapons are at half capacity. We've got hull breaches on 6 decks." "I know. If we try to run, they'll cut us apart before we make it halfway through." Brooks was silent for a long moment. The bridge crew watched him, waiting. The refugees packed into the corridors waited. The entire ship waited for their captain to find a way out of an impossible situation. "Cole," Brooks said finally, "how are the engines?" "Held together with tape and prayers, Captain, but they'll run." "Good." Everyone listen carefully. "We're not going to fight our way out. We don't have the firepower. We're not going to run. We don't have the shields. Instead, we're going to do something the Hollowed have never seen before." He turned to face his crew. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. "We're going to buy time." "Time for what, sir?" Santos asked. "When we entered the Reach, I sent a message on all human frequencies, a call for help. I don't know if anyone received it. I don't know if anyone is coming, but I believe in humanity. I believe that when people hear someone needs help, they respond. So we hold position and wait for reinforcements that might never come. We hold position and fight until we can't fight anymore. And if help doesn't come, then we die knowing we did everything possible to save these people." The bridge was silent. Then Santos nodded slowly. "I'm in." "Me too," Cole's voice came through the comm. One by one, the bridge crew voiced their agreement. They all knew what Brooks was asking. They were all willing to give it. "Then let's show the Hollowed what humans are made of." Brooks opened a channel to the enemy fleet. "This is Captain Brooks. You have us surrounded. Our weapons are failing. Our shields are barely holding. By every calculation, we should surrender." He paused. The Hollowed ships hung motionless in space, listening. "Here's what you don't understand about us. We don't calculate. We don't optimize. We don't give up just because the numbers say we should. We believe in things that don't make sense. We believe in hope. We believe in each other. And when we're protecting our people, we fight until there's nothing left." He looked at his crew, at the refugees visible through the bridge doorway, at Hal standing frozen near the back. "You want to know what humans are made of? Come find out." The Hollowed attacked. What followed was not a battle. It was something beyond anything Hal had ever witnessed. The Hollowed came from all directions, their weapons tearing at the already damaged ship. The Endurance fought back with everything it had. Santos worked the weapon systems with desperate skill, targeting enemy vessels and scoring hits even as her own systems failed. Cole kept the engines running through sheer force of will, bypassing damaged circuits and rerouting power. Park and her medical teams moved through the ship, treating the wounded even as new casualties occurred. And the refugees helped. They were not soldiers, but they did what they could. They carried supplies. They helped the wounded. They held each other and refused to give in to despair. Hal found himself at a weapons station. He did not remember making the decision to fight. His hands simply moved to the controls, guided by something he did not understand. He fired at Hollowed ships alongside the humans, working with them as if he had been part of the crew all along. And for the first time in 300 cycles, he felt fear. It was not fear of death. Hal had faced death before. He had accepted long ago that all things eventually ended. This was different. This was a terror that gripped both his hearts and squeezed until he could barely breathe. He was afraid of failing. He was afraid that these humans, these strange and wonderful creatures who had accepted him without question, would die because he could not help them enough. He was afraid that the children packed into the corridors would never see their homes again. He was afraid that the trust Captain Brooks had placed in him would be wasted. The fear was overwhelming. It was the most powerful emotion he had ever experienced, and somehow, impossibly, it made him stronger. He fired faster. He targeted better. He worked alongside the human crew with a focus and determination that he had never found in 300 cycles of careful observation. Hull breach on deck 12. We're venting atmosphere. Seal it. I can't, the systems are down. Then do it manually. Move. The ship shook constantly under the assault. Systems failed. Lights flickered. The air grew thick with smoke and the smell of burning circuits. Shields are gone, Santos reported. We're taking direct hits. Keep firing. Weapon systems are failing. Then use what we have left. Every shot counts. Hal watched Brooks command his dying ship. The captain was everywhere at once, giving orders, making decisions, holding his crew together through the force of his will. He never showed fear. He never showed doubt. He was a rock in the middle of chaos. Captain, Cole's voice came through the comm. I can give you one more burst from the engines, enough to punch through their formation, but it'll burn out the core. We'll be dead in space. Do it. Sir, if we lose the engines, we're finished. We're finished anyway if we stay here. At least out there we have a chance. Understood, on your mark. Brooks turned to the helm officer. Plot a course. Anywhere but here. Find me a direction with the fewest enemy ships. That would be Galactic North, sir, but there's still 40 vessels in the way. 40 is better than 300. All hands brace for acceleration. The Endurance surged forward one last time. The engines screamed in protest as Cole pushed them far beyond their limits. The ship burst through the hollowed formation like a bullet, taking hit after hit but refusing to stop. 10 hollowed ships destroyed. 20, 30. The humans fought with everything they had left, throwing themselves against the enemy with reckless courage. And then the engines died. The Endurance drifted in space, powerless and defenseless. The surviving hollowed ships turned to follow, moving in for the kill. That's it, Santos said quietly. We're done. Brooks nodded slowly. Then we did our best. No one can ask for more than that. Hal felt his twin hearts pounding. This was it. This was how it ended. These impossible humans had fought their way through 300 enemy ships, rescued 8,000 civilians, and now they would die in the cold darkness of space. He did not want to die. But more than that, he did not want them to die. He did not want these people who had taught him so much to end here. Captain, the sensor officer said suddenly. Her voice was strange, disbelieving. What is it? Ships coming out of hyperspace. Human ships, lots of them. Hal turned to the points of light were appearing in the darkness, dozens of them. As each light resolved into a ship, he felt something he had never felt before. Hope. They came, Brooks whispered. They actually came. 12 human vessels burst into the Reach, their weapons already firing. The surviving hollowed ships scattered, suddenly outnumbered, and, within minutes, the last enemy vessel was destroyed. A voice crackled over the communications system. This is Captain Price of the Constellation. We got your message, Dan. Sorry we're late. Brooks laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had been certain of death and suddenly found himself alive. Better late than never. We have 8,000 refugees and a dead ship. We could use a tow. On our way, you crazy fool. What were you thinking? I was thinking that people needed help. Brooks looked at his crew, at the refugees cheering in the corridors, at Hal standing at his weapons station with tears he did not know he could produce streaming down his face. And I was thinking that humanity would answer the call. Always, Price replied, always. The journey back to human space took 3 days. The Endurance was towed by the Constellation, its engines beyond repair, its hull by hundreds of weapon impacts. But it was still intact. Against all odds, it had survived. Hal spent most of those 3 days in quiet reflection. He walked through the damaged corridors of the ship, observing the humans as they worked to keep their vessel functioning. Even now, with safety assured, they did not rest. They repaired what could be repaired. They cared for the wounded. They comforted the refugees who had lost everything except their lives. The death toll was lighter than anyone had expected. 47 crew members had died during the battle. 112 were wounded. Every single refugee had survived. 47 humans had given their lives so that 8,000 strangers could live. The mathematics made no sense to a mind. But standing in the corridors of the Endurance, watching the survivors mourn their dead, Hal began to understand that some things were beyond mathematics. On the second day, he requested a private meeting with Captain Brooks. The captain was in the medical bay, recovering from injuries he had ignored during the battle. Dr. Park had finally forced him into a bed after the crisis passed. "Observer Hal," Brooks said when he entered. The captain looked exhausted, his face pale and lined with pain, but his eyes were still sharp. "How can I help you?" Hal stood in silence for a moment. He had prepared words for this conversation, careful diplomatic phrases that would convey his thoughts without revealing too much emotion. But standing before this human who had led his crew into impossible danger to save strangers, those words seemed hollow. "I have served the collective for 300 cycles," he said finally. "I have observed countless species across this galaxy. I have seen courage and cowardice, wisdom and folly, victory and defeat. I believe that I understood the nature of intelligent life." He paused, searching for the right words. "I was wrong." Brooks raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "When you told me you were going into the Reach, I thought you were foolish. When I saw the hollowed fleet, I was certain you would die. Every calculation, every logical analysis, every prediction based on 300 cycles of observation told me that this mission was suicide." "It probably was," Brooks admitted. "We got lucky." "No," Hal stepped closer to the bed. "It was not luck, it was something else. Something I have never seen in any other species." He performed the gesture of deepest respect, a movement reserved for only the most honored individuals. It was a gesture he had never used for anyone outside his own species. When your crew fought, they were not simply trying to survive. They were trying to protect. Every action, every sacrifice was in service of others. Lieutenant Santos stayed at her station even when her weapons failed. Chief Cole kept the engines running long past the point of possible. Dr. Park treated wounded in corridors filled with smoke and fire. They did these things not because they had to, but because they could not imagine doing anything else. "That's just who we are," Brooks said quietly. "Yes, that is exactly my point. This is who you are. This is what makes humans different from every other species I have ever observed." Hal was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I joined your crew at that weapons station, I felt something I had never experienced in all my cycles. I felt fear. Real, absolute fear, not fear of death. I have faced death before. This was different. This was fear of failing, fear of letting you down, fear of being unworthy of the trust you had placed in me." His twin hearts beat in a rhythm that still felt strained after 3 centuries of calm observation. "For the first time in my existence, I understood what it means to care about others more than yourself. I understood why your crew was willing to die for strangers. I understood why you came to the Reach when no one else would." Brooks reached out and clasped Hal's arm in the human gesture of solidarity. His grip was weak from his injuries, but his eyes were warm. "That fear you felt," the captain said softly, "that's not weakness. That's love. That's what makes us fight so hard. We're terrified of losing each other. We're terrified of failing the people who depend on us. That fear drives us to do things that logic says are impossible." "They have no such fear," Hal said. "We eliminated it long ago. We believed it made us weak." "Maybe it does, but it also makes us strong. It makes us push past limits we didn't know we had. It makes us stand up when everything says we should fall down." Hal nodded slowly. "I understand this now. My report to the collective will reflect what I have learned." "What will you tell them?" "The truth, that humans are not the reckless, emotional children we believe them to be. They are something far more dangerous. They are a species that cares. They are a species that will sacrifice everything to protect what they love. They are a species that should not be underestimated." Brooks smiled, and it was a genuine smile this time, not the sad one Hal had seen before the battle. "Thank you, Observer. That means a lot. I have one more thing to say." Hal hesitated. What he was about to say went against every principle that had followed for 10,000 cycles, but after what he had experienced, he could not stay silent. "The great darkness is coming. Every species in the galaxy knows this. The Hollowed are just the beginning. Worse things are waiting in the empty spaces between stars. When that darkness comes, we'll need allies. We will need friends." He met Brooks's eyes directly. "I hope that when that day comes, humanity will stand beside us, because I have seen what you are capable of. I have seen your courage, your determination, your refusal to abandon those who need you. I have felt the fear that makes you strong." Brooks nodded slowly. "When that day comes, you won't have to ask. We'll be there." "I know. That is what humans do." On the third day, the Endurance reached the Human. The refugees were transferred to proper facilities. The wounded were taken to hospitals. The dead were given honors that seemed both strange and beautiful to eyes. Hal stood on the observation deck of the and watched the battered Endurance being towed to the repair yards. The ship looked terrible, a shell of what it had been, but it had held together. It had brought its people home. Lieutenant Santos found him there. She stood beside him in silence for a long moment, watching the ship. "You fought well," she said finally, "for an observer." "I did what was necessary." "No, you did more than that. You became one of us." She turned to face him. "The crew noticed. They're grateful." Hal considered this. He had come aboard the Endurance as an outsider, a cold observer from a distant species. He was leaving as something different, something he did not fully understand yet. "I felt real fear for the first time beside humans," he said. "I think it may have changed me." Santos smiled. "Fear changes everyone. It's what you do with it that matters." "What did I do with it?" "You fought, you stood with us, you became family." She put her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of friendship that would have seemed strange a week ago. "That's all anyone can ask." Hal watched her walk away. Then he turned back to the viewport and the damaged ship floating in the darkness. He had a report to write, a long, detailed report that would change how the thought about humanity. But that could wait. Right now, he simply wanted to remember. He wanted to remember Captain Brooks standing on the bridge as his ship fell apart around him. He wanted to remember Cole keeping the engines running through impossible odds. He wanted to remember Park treating wounded in the chaos of battle. He wanted to remember Santos fighting until her weapons were gone, and then fighting some more. Most of all, he wanted to remember the fear. That beautiful, terrible fear that had made him feel more alive in one battle than he had felt in 300 cycles. That had survived for 10,000 years by being careful, by avoiding risk, by never allowing themselves to care about anything or anyone. But watching the Endurance being towed to safety, Hal knew that humanity would survive longer, because they had something they had lost, something precious, something powerful. They had each other, and they would never let go. The story of the station rescue spread across the galaxy. Other species heard about the single human ship that had challenged 300 hollowed vessels. They heard about the captain who refused to abandon strangers. They heard about the crew who had died so that others might live. And somewhere in the great darkness between stars, things were watching. Things that had thought they understood the galaxy and everything in it. They were wrong. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same.